Golf Ball Takes. This is your host, Yarby Laws, and this is my co-host.
Christopher Wells.
Thank you for all the support on the last episode. Thank you, everyone. We're really blessed to have the opportunity to, create content and talk basketball with you guys in the world. Um, but kicking off this episode, we're going to start off with KD. If you haven't heard the news, he's out for a month with an MCL sprain. Last year, when he went out for the Nets, it was a decent stretch of games. They went 5-16. We pretty much all know the impact that Durant provides for the Nets. But their upcoming games include 76ers twice, the Bucks, the healthy Warriors, and the Celtics. And, I watched the game live, not in person, but, on TV. And I saw him collide with Jimmy Butler. And he definitely looked like he was in some serious pain, and he left that game early. But prayers for him, wish him a speedy recovery. But
Yeah,
on the last,
absolutely.
but on the last episode, we did mention, the Nets potentially getting some help to beef their team up, and keep them afloat in the tight Eastern Conference.
Yeah, so like Adrian Wojnarowski, so basically today he had mentioned that the Nets look to be one of the more active teams around the trade deadline, February 9th, which, this makes sense. They've been really good this season after the slow start. They look like one of the top contenders for the title. The name that had been mentioned that had been thrown around by, say, executives and whatnot had been John Collins. And I don't know. I can see why Brooklyn would be interested in John Collins. I don't understand why Atlanta would do this, because with Brooklyn, if you're not going to give up Durant or Kyrie, or I don't
Yeah.
even really think Simmons at this point. So the only guys you'd have left would be like Joe Harris, Patty Mills, a Seth Curry, or one of their young guys. Not all of those together, but some combinations of those. Obviously, you'd include a pick too, since Collins is better than those guys. But I don't know. I think it absolutely makes sense for the Nets, especially like, again, if you get him while Durant's out. I mean, that makes a lot of sense. It's going to make you better. Um, you get a talent upgrade, of course. I don't know. From the Hawks perspective, I get that they're struggling, but I would
Yeah.
also think that the Hawks would be looking to maybe get some more guys, not necessarily as a championship team, but just to be better than they are. Since we had heard earlier in the year that they could be a team where maybe Trae Young wants out, where like if they don't do very well.
Yep. Yeah. To go along with your points, like it does make sense for the Nets, but if you're the Hawks, I wouldn't personally do that if I were the Hawks, because Trae Young and John Collins, they look pretty good together when they're both on the floor. Um, I don't really see a point in doing that, but it's an interesting rumor because the Nets would definitely need him, or they
Yeah.
definitely do need him now with Durant out. So
Yeah. I guess if you're Atlanta, maybe you might look at it as you break up one guy's and get back, maybe like multiple guys. But I don't
yeah,
know. I do like John Collins, and I don't
me
know.
too.
I don't feel like giving him up for, those type of guys makes as much sense. I get putting shooters around the Hawks since they haven't shot the ball well this year, but I don't know. This is one where I don't feel like it makes quite as much sense. It feels more
Yeah,
one-sided.
yeah. All right. So moving on, we're gonna recap our predictions from Monday's episode. Um, and to kick it off, like Warriors versus Suns, we're gonna go with the biggest surprise, I guess you could say.
For sure.
Yeah, definitely took me by surprise. But Warriors lost to the Suns 125-113. And, you know, Curry, he came back. So he's back from his injury. He finished with 24 points, but, he kind of got most of his points during garbage time, I guess you want to call it.
Right.
But, they did, like you said, LA fans, y'all coined the term. What
Yeah,
was
the
it?
fake comeback.
Yeah, fake comeback. There you go.
Yeah.
So, like, they tried to pull off one of those, but, Clay had 29 too. But, both of us thought that the Warriors would beat the Suns no problem because they didn't have a lot
Right.
of their big name guys in there.
Yeah.
But
This was one that definitely took me by surprise because,
yeah,
again, like you said, for the Suns, I mean, there were so many of their guys, not even just starters, but key bench pieces, right? Like no Chris Paul,
yeah,
no Booker, no Aiton, not even like a Cam Johnson or Cam Payne,
exactly.
or uh, obviously Jay Crowder's not with the team. Just so many guys out. But, you got to give credit to the Suns. They had been going through a rough stretch. They had lost like 6 in a row, 9 of their
Hmm.
last 10. And, you know, I mean, this is the NBA, and this season there's been so many weird things happening. Especially with the scoring, it just feels like any given night, like these teams could just catch somebody by surprise, and this just so happened to be one of those nights.
Yeah, and like with the Suns, like um, Damian Lee had 22, Dwayne
Yeah,
Washington 21, Mikal Bridges 26,
yeah,
and Sarge I think had like 19 or 20. But it's like
yeah.
they played some real team basketball, and it's like you can't really beat that.
Right, and it was funny because Damian Lee, he had mentioned that obviously he played for the Warriors last season, and he
Yeah,
had mentioned that this was a game that he had circled, and he definitely lived up to it in a big way. This was
for
definitely a
sure.
revenge game of sorts.
Yeah.
So on to the next one, which was also kind of another fun one that we had. Cavs Jazz. This one was again another upset. The Jazz won 116-114 despite Donovan Mitchell's 46. Um, Jared Allen, I think he got sick early on in the game, so he didn't really finish the game, only played about 7-8 minutes, but it was definitely an interesting game. Donovan Mitchell's return to Utah after being traded from there in the offseason. But it was kind of cool to see, how the Jazz fans were really appreciative of him. There was lots of love, lots of cheers from the fans when he was there. It was kind of funny late in the game when he airballed the shot and he was just kind of laughing it off. It was just good to see
Yeah.
because it definitely had felt like in some of the more recent years, some guys that had gotten traded from teams didn't really always get like that warm of a welcome.
Yeah.
And this was definitely interesting to see, especially, given how he had mentioned that like there were a lot of fans in Utah that didn't really treat him all that great there.
Yeah. Um, I enjoyed the game. I watched most of it, but like you said, Jared Allen did leave early. Jarrett Allen, excuse me, he did leave early, but like I feel like the Cavs should have won this game regardless, to be
Right.
honest. But like
Yeah.
nonetheless, it was pretty nice to see Mitchell play in Utah again. That's what the
Yeah.
whole storyline was.
And then of course, you had I guess kind of like the play of the game sort of where Clarkson basically gets 7 points. I mean, he
Yeah.
nails the three, draws the flagrant, and nails the free throws. And it was just like, it's just kind of funny when you just see those type of moments in the game.
Hmm.
Of course, Clarkson's another guy that had been playing pretty well this season, but like you said, I definitely felt like the Cavs should have won regardless because I just feel like they're a better team.
Exactly.
But of course, as we had mentioned before, anything in the NBA can happen, and it's definitely been happening this season.
Anything goes. Um, but yeah, moving on. So we also had the Nuggets versus the Lakers.
Yep.
We both picked the Nuggets, so woohoo.
And of course, for this game, obviously the big storyline was no LeBron. Um, obviously we didn't know that going in because we had taped it before,
Yeah.
but obviously that definitely makes a huge difference. But either way,
Hmm.
they still won anyways.
Yeah. Nuggets won 122, 109. And like you said, we kind of, we didn't know LeBron was going to be out, but we still had the Nuggets winning this one because we
Yeah, no,
both
really,
know, everyone knows they're the better team. They're superior. So
for sure.
yeah.
And at home as well. I mean,
Yeah, exactly.
next game, we had the Bulls and the Celtics. This was actually a game where we had actually had different picks. I picked the
Hmm.
Celtics to win. Um, you would pick the Bulls to win,
Yeah.
of course, but I mean, the Celtics win 107-99. I mean, this was kind of an interesting game. I mean, of course, I can't leave out the fact that DeMar DeRozan did get hurt in the game, so I think that should definitely be something I should mention. But Jason Tatum, another really strong game, 32 points, 7 assists, 8 rebounds. The Celtics, again, as we have mentioned before, so far this season, they've been the best team in the Eastern Conference.
Hmm.
Tatum's still building his case for the MVP.
Yeah.
And then of course there's also had been word today that now Jaylen Brown's going to be out for potentially a week or two. So that's could obviously change some things up, especially given how close the Eastern Conference has been. But nonetheless, I mean, you know, I still picked the Celtics to win, and it was no surprise to me.
Yeah. Like you said earlier, I had the Bulls winning this one, but Levine had 27 points, but
Right.
it's just no match for Boston's defense or offense because, like you said, Tatum had 32 for the win. So,
Right.
um,
Next game,
yeah.
Miami Thunder. This was another game, obviously, where in the last one we had picked the opposite teams. I picked Miami. He had picked OKC, and you couldn't have asked for a more interesting game. I mean, the
Yeah.
Miami Heat basically win by 1 point, 112, 111. Jimmy Butler, of course, had a big game, 35 points, but it was kind of funny because 23 of those points came from the free throw line. Miami had actually set a record going 40 of 40 from the free throw line
Yep.
in a game which they still only won by 1 point.
Yeah.
Of
Crazy.
course, yeah, of course, for me, I picked Miami just because I felt like they were at home. OKC hadn't been that great on the road, but I did acknowledge that, like, of course, if Shea goes off and has a really good game, they could still win, and they were right there with them.
Yeah. Um, like you said, I'd pick the Heat or the Thunder. Sorry. Um, I predicted SGA was going to go for 30, but he went for 26. But
If he had gone for 30, they would have won.
exactly. So like, but that just shows you Shea is next up for sure. The Heat's defense is pretty good, but I don't know. I feel like they won this game because of free throws. Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, if you get 40 free throws in a game, I mean, that's definitely a game you should win.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was clearly the difference. And I mean, and they were still down. I mean, Jimmy Butler had to get, that big and one to put them up by one.
Yeah.
And OKC, gets 2 free throws really late and they miss both free throws. And then it's a complete swing because
Yeah.
instead of getting 2 free throws and you go up, instead you miss both and you go down.
Yeah. All right. So moving on to Bucks Hawks. We both picked the Bucks for this one,
Yeah.
and they beat the Hawks 114 to 105. I watched every minute of this game, but Giannis was in early foul trouble, and he ended up with 5 fouls. And he only had 7 points, 18 rebounds, and 10 assists. Crazy. He still got a double-double, but without points, which is crazy.
Yeah.
The Hawks were pretty much getting blown out until like around the middle of the third. And then Atlanta actually took the lead in the fourth. It was pretty much a back and forth game up until like the final 3 minutes. Drew Holiday finished with like 27, and he pretty much took over in the fourth. Uh, and I have a big question for you.
Yeah.
Do you think because me personally, I'm curious to see Chris Middleton back in the rotation.
Mhm.
But do you think he's gonna, take them to the next level and maybe get to the finals if he's healthy, if he's on the roster?
Yeah, I mean, I think so. I mean, he hasn't played much this season, but obviously, they had won the title 2 seasons ago with him being basically the second best player.
Yeah.
I mean, of course, obviously in last year's playoffs, he had played, pretty well and then got hurt in the Bull series, and then the Celtics went in 7. I personally feel like that they would have beaten the Celtics if Middleton had been healthy.
Same.
So I think if he can have a healthy season, I definitely think that they're right there with Boston. I
Yeah.
still think you have to give the edge to Boston only just because of what they've been able to do so far this season, but I don't think the Bucks are that far behind. And their ceiling, I think, definitely could be higher because of how good Giannis is.
For sure.
Moving on to the last game from our prediction set, we had Knicks Pacers. This was another game where we had opposite picks. I picked Indiana. He had picked New York.
Mm-hmm.
And then the Knicks won, like 119 to 113.
Yep.
Of course, going in, this was another situation like the Lakers where some things happened that I didn't expect going in. Miles Turner was a late scratch with back spasms. I mean, obviously he's been really good this year. Tyrese Halliburton gets hurt in the game. He's going to be out for about 2 weeks. That obviously changes things. But, again, you got to give credit to the Knicks. They had kind of a stretch, a little bit earlier where they had struggled, and now RJ Barrett's back, so maybe they're starting to kind of get things back under control.
Yeah.
But
speaking of RJ, I want to issue my formal apology because in the last episode, I did basically say he was a non-factor. So I'm sorry, RJ. You had 27. Huge props to you. So good job, my guy.
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. For the Knicks, I still personally feel like they did mess up not trading for Donovan Mitchell. Again, I do like RJ Barrett, but I mean, it was just kind of odd because initially it had been suggested that the Jazz didn't want him, and then they did. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just kind of an interesting situation. It's just kind of one of those big what if scenarios over there. But I do like RJ Barrett a lot, and I think that he can make a difference for this Knicks team. But I don't know. I still feel like that it would be kind of more useful if they got, maybe another guy, not necessarily instead of him, but if they could maybe pick up a guy at the deadline. We'll see. as the
Yeah.
deadline approaches. We got less than a month. All right, so we're at the halfway point of the season for most of these teams. Most of these teams have played about 41 games or so. We're starting to see more of the teams that could probably realistically contend for the title. So for me, I tried to come up with it, 3 teams in each conference that I think could realistically win the title this season. And again, I could easily be wrong, but in the Eastern Conference, so I picked Boston, Milwaukee, Brooklyn. So for the Eastern Conference, I mean, Boston, I mean, they went to the finals last season. So to me, the way they played this season, no surprise. 29 and 12. Tatum's been great. Brown's been great.
Hmm.
Brogdon's been awesome off the bench. A lot of the other guys have also played really well. I mean, I feel like this team should be considered the favorite in the Eastern Conference, but I don't know. You never know because the Eastern Conference has been the top of it is really good.
Yeah.
Um, and then the second team, of course, Milwaukee. Giannis. I mean, arguably the best player in the league. I mean, of course, Middleton hasn't really been healthy, but even then, they're still right there. You know, uh, with Brooklyn, with Boston. I mean, I really like this team too. I mean, I think they made some upgrades. Hopefully, guys like Joe Ingles, can kind of continue to get healthy and find their groove.
Yeah.
Maybe they make a move at the deadline or maybe in the buyout market. And then, of course, we get into Brooklyn. This is kind of this was really an interesting one. This was kind of like the X factor where, to me, this season could have gone 2 ways for Brooklyn. It could have either gone in a way where they look really good and they look like one of the best teams and they're in position to contend for a title, or it could kind of go really south. And then
Right.
Durant wants out and they move Kyrie. And it was looking like that early in the season when they were really struggling. Steve Nash, it seemed like couldn't figure out how to get these guys to buy in, but they fire him, they bring in Jock Vaughn, and everything's completely turned around. Of course, doesn't automatically mean they win the chip because we still have to see what they do in the playoffs, but I don't know. I mean, you also look at Ben Simmons, with the way he's kind of been able to turn things around a little bit. Obviously, not quite the scorer he was in Philly, but
Yeah.
he's still helping contributing to win. So I mean, if you're Brooklyn, I mean, I feel like you got Kevin Durant. I mean, like you got a guy that's like I said is as good as anybody, including Giannis. So I mean, if you have that plus Kyrie plus Simmons and another cast of role players, and like we had mentioned before, they could potentially be in line to maybe add somebody at the deadline. I mean,
Oh yeah.
I think that's another team that could definitely contend in the Eastern Conference. This is the best that the East has looked, and I mean, you even have teams that are a little below that where I think they're really good, just not
Hmm.
quite contenders, right? Teams like Cleveland, I
Hmm.
think they're maybe like another player, like a wing away, maybe next season, but not quite this season. But of course, they could definitely make a team scared. Then
Yeah.
of course Philly. I mean, they've been good. They've been much better. They were another team like Brooklyn that had a rocky start, but I just don't trust that combination of Harden and Embiid come playoff
Nope.
time with Doc
Nope.
Rivers. I don't. Yeah, so I feel like Boston, Milwaukee, Brooklyn. Those are my 3 teams in the Eastern Conference. I don't know. So what would yours be?
I'm taking Boston, Bucks, and I really want to put the Cavs there, but I'm not
Okay.
sure. I'm not
Okay.
sold. Like I really love Garland. I love Mitchell. I just love that team, but you know what? I'm taking give me give me the Celtics, Bucks, and Cavs because I'm gonna put the Cavs there.
Okay.
And I think Donovan Mitchell really takes them to the next level because, he has some playoff experience, but, he's invaluable. Like, he's just so good at what he does. I think he can potentially get them out of the East.
Absolutely. Yeah, I really like the way they defend. But
Exactly.
yeah, it's just for me, I'm just not quite ready to put them there in the contenders. But of course, they could come in and just surprise, and especially when you consider the way that the East has kind of been structured this year with all these teams. I mean, it's going to be a bloodbath. I mean, one of these
Yeah.
teams is going to have to beat pretty much everybody. I mean, it's going to be really interesting to see who comes out on top.
And like I think with the East, I think Durant's injury kind of shakes things up a little bit because, the Nets could go on a losing streak,
Yeah.
and with the thing that I like about Cleveland so much, I forgot to add this, was their front court. Like, I love Mobley and I love Jared Allen. Like, that's such a good combo because you got a skilled center and then a defensive one, you know?
Absolutely. Both big, both athletic.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um, so moving on, for me, in the Western Conference, this one was a lot harder to put together just because of the way the Western Conference has been, with the way that, Golden State hasn't played that well this season.
Hmm.
You've had so many teams running with injuries, teams that, we feel like should have a better record, but again, you have to add in the context of injuries. I don't know. This list was really hard to come up with, but for me, I've had Denver, I had Memphis, and I had Golden State.
Okay.
Golden State, I'm still not quite ready to move off of them because I just think when they're healthy, they play really well together. They're
They're
really good,
so
and they
good.
won the title last year.
Yeah.
I'd have a really hard time like believing that they would go from what they were last year, where they were really good for most of the season up until they had the injuries, and then still won
Hmm.
the title, to what they've been this season, where they just haven't been all that consistent. I mean, they've basically been a 500 team this
Yeah.
whole season. It's been really weird. I know they've had injuries, but even during the earlier parts of the season where they had most of their guys, they still weren't really all that consistent. I know the Draymond Poole incident may have had something to do with it. Their defense has been bad for most of the season, but it's just so odd. But I'm still not quite ready to move off of them. And I think that they are also another team that could make a move at the
Yeah.
deadline. Of course,
Easily.
as we get closer to the deadline, maybe we'll start hearing some more names and rumors, but I don't know. It's been such a weird season for them.
Yeah. Um, for the West, for me, it's actually very different. Well, not very different. One team is different. So I've got the Nuggets. That's undisputed, I think. And I have Mavericks and Warriors.
Okay, this is going to be interesting.
So here's my thing. I'm not sold on the Grizzlies. I
Okay.
don't think they're playoff ready. I think they're going to be one of those teams where they're great in the regular season, but when it comes down to playoffs, I'm just not sold yet. I think they're too young. That's their main issue. I think, you know, 2, 3 years, I think they'll win a chip, but I don't see it happening this year.
Okay.
Um, Mavericks, Luca, he's just one of a kind. Simple as that. And I think come playoff time, like we're gonna see a whole like new level of Luca that we haven't even seen this regular season, which I know is crazy to say because he's dropping triple doubles left and
So are you
right.
going to see like a 70-point playoff game or an
I
80
think
point
so.
playoff game?
I'm calling it right now. You heard it here first on off ball takes. I think Luca's gonna go for 70. Um, and then for the Warriors, basically the same thing you said. You know, I think the Jordan Poole Draymond incident really messed with their chemistry. It was really unforeseen. Nobody expected that to come out.
Right.
So I think they're kind of still reeling from that. And then, you know, but we can't count Clay out because he's looking better and better.
Right.
Curry, he's coming off the injury, but I think once he's fully healed and come playoff time, like we know what this team is about, and they're
Exactly.
about handling their business. Clearly with all the championships they have. So, and they've got the experience. I think that's the thing. They've got the experience out of all these teams, and
Right.
I think they can do it.
Yeah. With Denver, it's kind of interesting. They've been the number one seed. They've been great at home. You got Jokic, who's been playing, at a super high level.
Hmm.
I don't know. It's so difficult for me to, pick one of these teams to come out of the West, because I don't know. Because again, like, I know Denver's been really good, but at the same time, I don't know. It's so hard for me to visualize Denver coming out of the West and, going to the finals and winning it all. It just seems so odd. I mean, again, I
Yeah,
like the team. I
me
know they've
too.
had issues with health for the last few years, and now they're, kind of fully healthy and ready to go with Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. But
Hmm.
at the same time, I mean, I don't know. I do feel like that they may be a safer pick just because of how Golden State has been, but at the same time, I feel like Golden State is the higher ceiling just because we
Yeah,
saw what they did last year. We know what they can be. But at the same time, Denver, I think, is another team that could make, some moves to maybe to acquire, another guy coming off the bench that can help contribute. And I mean, I feel like that they just may need one more guy.
yeah. I think
Um,
you're right.
yeah, with Memphis for me, the main reason I had picked them was just because I feel like last year, some of the experience that they had in the playoffs, I feel like should help them. They've been so good, even with guys out, similar to last year. And again, I know I keep on kind of saying this, but it feels like another team that at the deadline could make another move to bring a guy in. And I feel like the type of guy that they could bring in may be a higher quality guy just because of the types of contracts they have. Maybe you move
Yeah.
off of like a Dylan Brooks. Um, maybe you move one of those other young guys in combination with him. I mean, I
Hmm.
feel like they have a lot of options and flexibility. Of course,
For
they've
sure.
got picks. Um, Whereas with Denver, the pick situation is a little bit different. I feel like those might be a little bit harder to move since they've made some of those other moves in the past. And then with Golden State, obviously, you can factor in maybe they might move one of the young guys. We'll
Hmm.
see. Wiseman, has been hurt, but he really hasn't been that great this season. Same
Yeah.
with kind of some of the other young guys. But and then outside of those three teams, of course, there's that you have other teams that have been playing real well. New Orleans, but the issue with New Orleans is that they haven't been healthy, and I don't know. I just feel like I need to see them in the playoffs. I know they were in the playoffs last year, but again, without Zion. Whereas the other teams, I've seen them in the playoffs before. So I'm just with New Orleans. I don't know. I feel like that may be a team. Not that they're frauds, obviously, but like
Yeah.
I feel like that's the team where I would be higher on Memphis more so than New Orleans, only because I feel like they've had a little more experience. With Dallas, my issue kind of just comes down to just the fact that who else is going to contribute outside of him. I know that you got Spencer Dinwiddie and Christian Wood, and those guys are
Yeah.
fine, but you know, when you only have like, one guy that can create most of the offense, I just feel like come playoff time that might be really difficult. And it worked last year, but I feel like the Western Conference, even though, the records may not necessarily show it, I feel like there's more good teams and it may just be a little bit tougher. But for Dallas, they've been pretty good for most of the season. If they can stay in the higher tier, they could win a round, but I don't know. I
Yeah.
feel like that might be it. I feel like after one round they may go out.
Okay. Like I said, I think they can take it all the way. I think Luka's just unstoppable.
Yeah. And then when you look at the Western Conference, you almost kind of wonder with the way the Eastern Conference is, how much of a bloodbath that is. You almost kind of wonder if whoever comes out of the West may be able to win just because they may just have less fatigue on them.
Yeah.
I mean, think about it. If you're, one of Boston or Brooklyn or the Bucks, like I said, you got to go through, you know, two of those three teams just to get to the finals.
Exactly.
Let's say if you're, the Bucks who are the 3 seed, you got to beat the Nets and the Celtics at some point. And I mean, I think they could do it, but I mean, by the time you get to the finals, who knows? I mean, they might just be gassed. I mean, of
Yeah.
course you can't always you always have to factor in injuries, but
Hmm.
still,
Yeah.
it's just been such an interesting season so far. And, just at the halfway point of the season, it's been really fun. I mean,
Yeah.
for me, I mean, yeah, Cleveland is definitely the team where not that I didn't see it coming, but they've been way better than I thought because I thought that they would probably be maybe in that, you know, 5, 6 spot. I know they were pretty good last year until the injuries, but they've really surprised me because, like I said, I think that is the team that in the Eastern Conference could be the wild card where if Garland and Mitchell, bring it, against the other team, they could be the
Oh
team
yeah.
that kind of makes the Dallas run like last year where they just go to the conference finals and you don't even expect it.
Yeah. This season's one for the books, man.
Yeah.
We got some rumors. First one is pretty big because this is a guy we haven't really heard much from in about 2 years. But Myers Leonard is pretty much back on the scene. He's been reportedly offered a workout with the Lakers. How do you feel about that?
Um, so obviously he had been kind of a controversial guy because of, the things he had said on the video stream a couple years
Hmm.
ago. I mean, but he was kind of on his way out of the league. I mean, not that he was necessarily like an awful player, but just, you know, he had kind of like lost some of his talent overall. And I just feel like he's just kind of like a replaceable player at this point. I
Yeah.
understand for the Lakers that, maybe you're thinking like get another big guy to, pair along with AD, but I don't really understand the fit. I mean, I get that he can shoot and space the floor and he's a big guy. He's, over 7 feet tall, but
Yeah.
never really been a great defender, not really that great of a rebounder, and despite his size, he doesn't really feel that physical of a player.
Yeah.
So I don't know. This is one where I personally don't think it makes a lot of sense. And I would honestly explore maybe even looking at maybe some younger G League guys over him. But,
Yeah.
we'll see. Regardless, if he is in his workout and he performs well, even if the Lakers don't pick him up, maybe some other team might be interested. They'd also Shams Charania had also reported he had some issues with injuries the last couple of years, and that now
Mm-hmm.
he's healthy. But I feel like that in combination with the controversy probably had been one of the reasons why he had also been out for so long.
Yeah, and just to touch on the controversy, just a little context on it. He used a racial slur offensive to Jewish people on Twitch while playing Call of Duty, and it basically cost him his job in the NBA for the past 2 seasons. But he's being offered a somewhat of a chance of redemption. And I think recently he immersed himself in the Jewish community and has been educated, further educated on how to carry himself in the world. So this is his second chance.
Great. And then also one of the other names mentioned for the Lakers has been Boogie Cousins, DeMarcus Cousins, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Another one where again, I get it. Like if you want a center to put next to AD, and obviously he had played with AD before, and it seems like all three of those guys, AD, LeBron, and Boogie, are pretty close. But it just again feels like another one where, I mean, he was really good for a long stretch in his career. He had injuries, of course, but I don't know. Again, it's just another one where I just don't feel like it makes a lot of sense. If I'm the
Yeah.
Lakers, I mean, I feel like maybe just looking for some wings or maybe some bigger ish type guards. Feel like that makes more sense than exploring these big man options. And if you're gonna get another big man, I think it makes more sense to get a more defensive minded rim protecting one, since you already
Mm-hmm.
have one in Thomas Bryant that's more of an offensive oriented one.
Yeah. And it would have been cool to see, a more fleshed out and complete lineup with DeMarcus Cousins and Anthony Davis. Like, if Cousins was healthier in his prime, like that would have been really cool to see, because we got a little glimpse at it when they were down in New Orleans. But stuff happens. It's the NBA. So
And the year the Lakers won the title, he was actually the guy that they signed before Dwight Howard. He
yeah,
tore his ACL and then he couldn't play, but they even had a chance to play together that year.
yeah, injuries have plagued him throughout his entire career, and that's why he's in the situation he's in. Because before all the injuries, he was arguably top two center.
Right. Yeah, he was just a really fun player to watch, just as a
Yeah,
scorer, as a passer. Just the physicality. He was a really fun player to watch.
yeah, so
Even
cool.
in Sacramento when he was, more so by himself. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, he was definitely one of the most interesting players to watch,
Yeah.
especially from the center position.
Mm-hmm.
But, again, it's a different time now, and I just feel like some of the things that he does may just not translate as well, especially on this Lakers team where I just think you just need a little bit more overall talent.
Yeah.
Um, Moving on to the next rumor, Miles Turner is a name that had been mentioned, tied to some other teams, not the Lakers actually, but New York Knicks and Los Angeles Clippers. So of those two teams, I personally think it would make more sense for the Clippers, only because your only center there is Zubac. You need a little bit more size. Obviously, they love to have these lineups out there that can shoot,
Mm-hmm.
and just I feel like with the Clippers, it almost feels like they may have too many guys, and you might just need to consolidate the roster a little bit by moving some of those guys for guys that are a little bit better. Not that
Sure.
all those guys are bad, but just to get some more guys that are good.
Yeah.
And I feel like that one makes more sense. The Knicks, um, I mean, that only really makes sense, I suppose, if you feel like you might just want to move on from Mitchell Robinson.
Mm-hmm.
I suppose if you're Indiana, maybe that would make more sense, because I just also don't know what on the Clippers you would want. Because if you're Indiana, I feel like you probably want, maybe more of the youth.
Yeah.
But at the same time, also reportedly, Indiana is another team that looks to be making some moves at the deadline, according to Jake Fisher. So maybe they might prefer some of the veteran guys on the Clippers. But for you, which one do you think you would prefer, either the Knicks or the Clippers?
Clippers. Yeah, 100%. Because like you did, you hit on all the points. I don't even need to really regurgitate, but I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. Um, Moving on into the next rumor, we also had John Collins, of course, of the Atlanta Hawks. We had mentioned him already. He's been in a lot of rumors, but this one actually has a little bit more specific names mentioned, to the Utah Jazz for Malik Beasley and Jared Vanderbilt. This is another one where if I'm Atlanta, I mean, I do like Jerry Vanderbilt and Malik Beasley, but it
Hmm.
almost kind of feels like a lateral trade. I don't really feel like it makes Atlanta that much better.
Yeah,
I mean, I don't know. Atlanta's been kind of a disappointment, so they may just kind of be at a point where like there's no real I don't think that there's a move that makes them one of the top teams in the Eastern Conference. There are moves that can
right.
maybe make them better than what they are, but also they just haven't been that great. But
Yeah,
if I'm Atlanta, I don't know. Like I said, I really do like John Collins, and I don't necessarily feel like I would want to trade him unless I'm getting back, something else. But I could definitely see some people liking this deal. But personally, if I'm Atlanta, I'd stay away from it.
yeah. I see. I really don't think Atlanta should trade John Collins. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a win for every other team that would be interested in him.
Yeah.
But if you're Atlanta, I don't think they should do it because, like I said earlier, I think Trey Young and John Collins look great on the floor together, and I'm not willing to give up on that just yet.